Welcome to the Authentic Self Revolution. I'm Carly, your guide on this journey to genuine living and the real wealth of freedom and fulfillment. In a world that just loves to tell us who we should be, we're here to remember who we truly are. We're here for the questioners, the misfits, and anyone who's ever felt there must be more to life than following the script. Together, we explore what it means to revolutionize your life by living it on your terms. Each week, we peel back the layers of shoulds and musts and dive into practical ways to live more authentically. If you're listening only and you want to see my face, you can head over to my YouTube channel, Owning Authenticity, where you'll find this podcast along with a treasure trove of other content aimed at uncovering who you truly are. Your authentic self is waiting, so let's dive in. So in the last episode, we talked about making your dream vision for your life your actual reality, like taking those someday plans and start baby stepping your way there today, okay? And that is probably my top answer to why is authenticity so important. Because when you're your authentic self, you become a magnet for your dream life, okay? And as I asked in that last episode, who doesn't want that? So first of all, if you haven't watched that one yet, you might really enjoy that if that sounds cool to you. If you're somebody who wants to live your dreams, like I highly recommend checking out that episode. You know I love practical tips, so that episode is no exception, full of those. And in this episode, we are sharing my second, me, myself, and I are sharing my second most important reason for why authenticity is so important, and that is its effect on social anxiety and anxiety in general, okay? And one of the reasons that this is my second answer is because I personally have dealt with a lot of anxiety-related disorders. I would go that far as to call it a disorder in my life. I've tried traditional therapies and medicines and all kinds of things, and I know that there are probably as many different solutions as there are people to answer this question, but for the sake of this episode, we're talking about how authenticity is medicine for anxiety and especially social anxiety, okay? And we're going to uncover that by getting down into the roots of what even social anxiety is stemming from. Like, where's that coming from? Like, in the moment when it's happening, it's just overwhelming and we can't breathe and we can't think straight and our face is red and our skin is hot and we got to get out of there, okay? And of course, when we're in a calmer state and we start looking in on that entire volcano of inner anxiety, it really does start to make sense. And it starts to make a lot of sense for why, as your authenticity increases, your social anxiety will come down. They're like inversely correlated, okay? And that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. So if that's something that's like right up your alley, please take a second, like the episode. If you're on Spotify, leave a review on this podcast. That helps other people find it. It tells the algorithm that you think there's good stuff in there. And so it's going to show that to more people. So I really appreciate your help in helping those who are a match to this content find their way to it. Okay? And so let's dive in. I'd like to share right up front, and you see, like, this is kind of vulnerable to talk about, but dude, I do it for the cause, all right? So like my authenticity, my vulnerability, my casa es su casa, all right? So like I'll lead from the front and share a very vulnerable, kind of embarrassing story about my own social anxiety and what that looked like for me personally. And then we'll dive into the practical tips. So we'll call it the short version. I'm going to get into some details, but by golly, I could probably tell a much longer version of this story if I wanted to. This happened back in the fall of 2012, so 12 years ago now. And I had moved to Dallas after college and got a job at a software company. And shortly after I moved there, I got myself on an email list for like a K-State meetup group. So they met up to watch football games and basketball games, and like they always had it at this same bar that was maybe 2 blocks away from where I worked. So I definitely knew the area. I could park at my job for free. I could walk down there. And I was on this email list for over a year before I ever worked up the nerve to go to one of these events. Okay, so I just want to start with that social anxiety will actually keep you from joining in. All right, I was so anxious. I was so scared and overwhelmed about this room full of brand new people that I've never met before that I couldn't even go. I had all kinds of excuses about I'm tired and I don't, just basically didn't want to. Like it just wasn't valuable enough experience for me to put myself through what I knew would be waiting there for me as far as some kind of spike in anxiety. It's going to be very uncomfortable. And after, 14, 15 months of living in Dallas, I was friggin' lonely. Okay, because along with not going to the K-State meetup group, I also wasn't putting myself out there in any other ways to make friends. So I had made one friend at work and we talked at work, but otherwise my social life was me and my cat. Thank God for her. Okay, so I was a little bit less alone. But I've got a cat as my best friend. And so 15 months into this situation, I'm like, all right, I am lonely AF. All right. It's like the loneliness is starting to get worse than my fear of walking into a room of a bunch of people I don't know. So that was the value assessment, right? Like for the first year plus, it was like, I don't want to put myself through that. And then the loneliness got bad. And so like, think about that as far as like the reasons that we will eventually tip over into socializing. Like we're social creatures. Like eventually there's nowhere to hide. Like you've got to face the fear, the social anxiety. And so at that point, I've been getting the email like every weekend, like, come join us, come hang out with us. And I'm like, no. And finally, this anxiety is like, or this loneliness is just like leading to this darker and darker and darker depression. And the scales tipped and the depression was worse than the anxiety. So I'm like, all right, I got to get out there. I got to reconnect myself. And so it seemed like, okay, like it'll be a K-State game, like they're focused on the game. Like I can just kind of slip in and hang out, maybe find, a nice looking person to like have a conversation with. I walk to the bar and like the whole time I'm walking to the bar, I feel the anxiety rising. I feel my shortness of breath. I feel my skin getting hot. I feel myself start to sweat, like all the classic symptoms of anxiety coming on me. And when I walked in to the bar, like the entire place is full of purple jerseys, like K-State purple everywhere you look. And I walked in and I looked around and it was like the like crescendo of the orchestra at that moment of like my inner anxiety. And I could feel myself start to have a panic attack. So I like buzzed through, like just cut a line through the bar to the back, to the bathroom. I go in the stall in the bathroom and I have a full on meltdown. Okay. Crying, hyperventilating. Like I just was so overstimulated at that moment. Overstimulated is a word that I have now that I didn't have back then, but we'll get into more of that later on in the episode. And let myself fall apart, let myself cry my mascara all down my face. And I was crying because I did not want to talk to them. I don't want to do this. I don't like this. This sucks. I don't even like football. Okay. I don't like big groups of people. I don't like people I don't know. I don't like football. What am I doing here? And in that bathroom stall, the most important part of this entire story happened. Okay. I gave myself permission to leave. I saw myself. I saw, again, I was not doing inner child work or any inner work at this point, mind you, but I saw a very scared little girl inside of myself that was just beside herself, could not cope with this situation that I was trying to put myself in. And it was like one of the earliest acts of self-love in my journey was giving myself permission to leave. You don't have to stay. You just walk out of the bathroom, walk back out the bar, down the block, get in your car, go home. You did good. You did good, sister, okay? Like, you came, you showed up. That's more than you've been doing for 15 months. Good job. And that little pep talk got me out of the bathroom stall, okay? The only reason I even left the bathroom stall was because I'm going home. I'm leaving. I'm done here, and I feel good about that, and I am on my way out. So I'm walking back out through the crowd of people, and as I'm going, it was like my higher self like came into my body and like took over control of the avatar, because as I'm walking past one of these tables, I see they have like, there's probably four of them. It was like 3 guys and a girl, and there's a 5th chair at their table, and they've got a bucket of beer. They're all watching the game. And in that moment, like I said, like total out of body experience, I walk over to that empty chair and I put my hands on the chair and I'm like, hey, do you guys mind if I join you? And the girl, I'm looking at her and she's like, oh, that would be great. She's like one of those like super extroverted, like comfortable in her skin, like hanging out with everybody. And I'm just like, okay, great. Take me under your wing. Hide me in the safety of the under the wing, and great, I'll hang out with you guys. They offered me one of their beers and I sat there for like 2 hours. I got their phone numbers. I hung out with her several more times. I hung out with all of them. We went to a couple concerts together. It wasn't like friends for life by any means, but that moment of there's an open chair. All you got to do is say, can I join you? Can I join you? And what's the worst they're going to say? No. Okay, cool. Walk out of the bar. I didn't do all this mental math, but looking back now, my higher self was like, saw the opportunity. And again, the most important part of that story is the self-love, the act of self-love that said, you don't have to stay. That like, I didn't force myself to just like get over it. No, don't do that. Like, please don't do that. That's cruel. It's cruel and unusual punishment to like tell your social anxiety, like GTFO, like get over it. Like you don't matter. Like these alarm bell signals that are like literally paralyzing and like destabilizing your entire system. Like, yeah, you don't matter. Like, come on, man. Like, no, it's everything. So in that moment of self-listening, in that moment of self-honoring and self-loving, giving myself permission to leave is what actually opened the door to some social contact. And the most interesting thing about that experience was that I was driven there by loneliness, and it actually felt really lonely to sit at their table and them watch football and talk about football. And I don't like football. I don't care. It's probably not even that I don't care. Like, I actively dislike it as a sport, as a concept. And here I am, like in the middle of a social situation where that's what it's about. I still felt pretty lonely. And so all of that to get into these practical explanations of like, what even is social anxiety? What's at the root? Why is authenticity the medicine? So let's get into, understanding the roots of social anxiety. And you see, like, it's not just being shy. Like, there is an intense and persistent fear of being watched and being judged by others. Everyday social interactions can cause significant anxiety, fear, self-consciousness, embarrassment, panic attacks. I mean, it is literally a threat. in your system. Like you're overwhelmed by the danger of the social experience. Okay. And so I say that to two reasons. Number one, if you are somebody who relates to having social anxiety, please do not ever to yourself or allow anyone else to yourself to minimize that. You're fine, just get over it. Like, it's not that big a deal. Like, no. We don't minimize this fear. We respect it. We listen to it. We honor it because there is something much deeper going on here. And that doesn't mean that we don't want to work through it and dismantle it and integrate it so that it's not standing in our way of a fulfilling life. But to say that it's not a big deal and you should just get over it, like, stop being so shy. Like, why are you so quiet? Like, I don't like that. And the second reason I say that is because if you're somebody who loves somebody who has social anxiety, please don't do that to them. Okay? And I think the rest of this episode is going to really help to understand, like, what is that deeper, tangled up ball of fear that's causing this reaction in the first place. And that's what we want to get at. That's what we want to have compassion for, is the tangled up ball of fear. Okay? We can't stop the symptoms. We can only deal with the fear and break that down piece by piece and give it the medicine it needs to heal. And that's where authenticity comes in. So when we think about social anxiety and inauthenticity, okay, it is essentially a self-protective mechanism, right? When you hide yourself away, when you put the invisibility cloak on in a social situation, when you put the mask on in a social situation, when you skip the social situation altogether, you are protecting yourself from a perceived dangerous threat. And that's the part where, like, honor yourself, build that trust with yourself that, like, I hear you and you can go home now. You don't have to force your way through this. You don't have to push your way through this. You can go home right now. So when we think about the root causes of, like, what is that driving that social anxiety, the fear of judgment is one. And when we think about fear of judgment, this is something that, like, people with really solid self-confidence, self-esteem, already, like, deeply into their authenticity, like, they just don't understand the fear of judgment. And this is something that, like, I can vouch for the authenticity journey, getting into your authentic self and living from the core of that truth. It heals the fear of judgment. Not overnight, not all at once, but a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And 12 years later, you don't even really relate to having social anxiety anymore. You can talk to anybody. It doesn't bother you, this fear of judgment. And in those days of the social anxiety, I had the fear of judgment bad. I did not want to be seen. I did not want to be criticized. I did not want to be judged. And the reason for that was because my sense of self was on very shaky ground. I already didn't think very highly of myself, and I mostly tried to distract myself from that fact. I tried to keep my mind off the not so great person I thought I was. And just don't look at self. And that was my strategy. And so for somebody else to reject me, to criticize me, to judge me in any way, it felt like a spotlight on what I was personally trying to avoid. And so that's where, like, the medicine of authenticity, the self-acceptance, right? The internal alignment, the self-approval, self-liking, you're, like, claiming your inherent worthiness, knowing that you are good because you exist. Like, all of these things that add up into us being able to be authentic, those are the same medicine for healing the fear of judgment. Like that's the hole that is there. It's the lack of self-acceptance that even makes judgment scary. So this is that wound and medicine dynamic of like, when we fear judgment, we need more self-approval. We need to know that regardless of what this person in front of me says, thinks, or does, I like me, right? And for me, my journey to self-love and self-acceptance was not exactly a straight shot into self-love. It was more like, first, I needed to understand myself. So there was a lot of self-awareness and self-learning. And in the self-awareness and self-learning, in understanding me, I started to like me quite a bit more. And in liking me quite a bit more, I started to pay closer attention to myself. I started to meet more of my needs. And in that process, I fell in love with me. So self-love bloomed out of self-like. Self-like grew out of self-understanding. Self-understanding grew out of paying attention to self. And that's not always easy when you don't like what you see. So it's kind of like the story I shared at the beginning, as far as like, the social anxiety was painful, but eventually the loneliness got worse. So looking at self is painful, but eventually the consequences of not doing it are worse. And when that happens, you turn inward and you start looking at yourself and you start liking yourself more. And that leads to loving yourself more and taking better care of yourself and making a nicer life for you. And all of that is so gradual, so incremental. But when you look back a decade later, it's like, wow, where'd my social anxiety go? It's amazing. Another one is wanting to appear perfect. Okay. And like, we often don't think in those terms. It's more like wanting to appear a certain way to others, wanting to be desirable by others. And this trying to craft and curate and control the image that we're projecting for other people to see, so that they will approve, so that they will accept us, so that they won't criticize, so that they won't judge, right? Like, we're already back into the fear of judgment, but this is just another facet of how that presents itself. It's like the medicine is embracing common humanity, embracing imperfection, embracing your uniqueness as what makes you beautiful and valuable, instead of trying to appear perfect and curated. Like the filters that we put inside of our mind of like, should I say this? How should I say this? Should I laugh because they laughed? Should I, like, all of these mental gymnastics and filters and shoving some things down and like faking other things, like all of that is what's causing the anxiety. That's freaking difficult. That's like a difficult math equation that you're trying to solve in every single moment of social interaction. And it's that right there that is giving rise to like, am I doing it right? I don't think this is going well. And like, that's what starts to bubble and build into the anxiety, into the panic attack. And so when we think about authenticity as the medicine, it removes the pressure. You just get to be you, and some people are going to like it and some people aren't going to like it so much, and that's okay because you like you. So there's no pressure to make other people like you. It takes away the internal conflict of, just naturally expressing who you are versus trying to hit the bullseye of like what this other person needs me to be. Again, that's really stressful and sometimes can lead you to do things that actually are in conflict with who you really are. Like in my example of like, I'm sitting here trying to like have a conversation about football. I dislike football. And that internal conflict was like getting more and more uncomfortable as we went on. And then the filtering, that filtering of like, what do they want from me? And what am I willing to show them? And how am I displaying what's wanted, what's approvable, what's acceptable? Again, that's hard work. It's exhausting. No wonder we don't want to go into social interactions when that's the job of being social. It's a very difficult role to play. And so basically what we're talking about is like when we like who we are, there is an inner safety of like that self-approval becomes this bubble around self, that like judgments will come in. Other people have different opinions. Other people have different likes. You laugh at something, nobody else laughs. Like all the things that are just like making your skin crawl when you're like really suffering from social anxiety. But like when you like you are truly just inside your own experience, enjoying your experience. So you laughed at something and nobody else laughed. Like, so you laughed. It was funny. So you enjoyed that moment, and that's all that matters, right? So like that self-approval bubble really starts to take away the power of any of those external opinions or judgments. And so we've talked about the reduced pressure. We haven't talked about the improved confidence in social interactions. Like when you like you, socializing is so different. Because I don't think we realize in those early days when we don't like ourselves and we're hiding and invisibility cloaking and shrinking and trying to be the perfect thing, there is this very subconscious fear driving all of these behaviors that's like, I hope they don't find out how bad I am. I hope they don't discover that actually like I'm a really shitty person. And that hurts. Like that fear is painful. And that's what's causing all of the gymnastics that we do in social situations to try to fit in, to try to belong, to try to be liked, to try to be approved of. We're afraid they're going to find us out. There's like a low-key imposter feeling that's like, I'm pretending to be a good person and I hope you buy it. Because I sure don't. I know it's not true, but I really hope you don't find that out. Like, man, like that, it just, it breaks my heart for my past self and for anybody else who's resonating with this conversation. It's like literally heartbreaking. And so when we think about liking ourselves, if you genuinely like who you are, you genuinely think you are a good person, on all levels of your being, you think you're a good person. When you walk into a social situation, it's a gift. And that's confidence. It's like other people getting to be around me, that's good for them. That's good news for them. You know, like when I go to my family lunch, which used to be a very anxiety provoking experience, so much so that I kind of tuned out of my family for several years. And at this point, I've gone back in and I feel very at peace in that situation. Like I'm participating and that's a beautiful thing. You know, for me, I get to be around them. I get to be in on the inside jokes. I get to, you know, experience these people that I care about that are my family, but also they get to experience me. You know, like I have a different point of view than pretty much all of them. I'm like the black sheep or whatever you want to call it. I don't feel quite so separate from them now as I used to. But yeah, I have a very different sense of humor. I have a very different bantering style than everybody else. So like when I'm there, the energy of the interaction's very different. You know, like I'm a spice, I'm a flavor that like if I don't go, the social situation lacks that flavor. And that's a loss for everybody, you know? So like seeing yourself as good and as a benefit to the social interaction, like that breeds this confidence. So it all is coming back to like, truly, what do you think of yourself? You know, like, do you think you're good or do you think you're bad? And there are a couple episodes coming up where we're going to talk about limiting beliefs and really dive into where these stories come from. This is like a social conditioning conversation where we don't come out of the womb believing we're bad, okay? Like we get taught that we're bad from people who are not taking like really specific care to make sure that when they're punishing us or, disciplining us in whatever way they see fit, they're not separating behavior from self. They're saying, you are bad. You're being bad. And not, you're making a choice that's bad. This behavior is bad. Let's don't do this behavior. I still love you. Like, you're still good and worthy of love. But this behavior, that hurts this and this and this. Like, making sure to make that distinction. There's just the blanket statement of like, you're bad. And we internalize that like the little wet cement creatures that we are before age 7 or 8. And then we grow up with this really deep-seated knowing that we're bad. And when we walk into social situations, we're terrified that other people are going to find that out, kick us out of the tribe, and that'll mean certain death because the tribe is survival. So social anxiety is not necessarily something to take lightly, right? So I'm so glad that you're here and that we're having this conversation. So let's dive into some more of those fears and like the ways that they can play out as far as like the societal expectations, and depending on what situation it is, like if you're with family or if you're in a professional setting, or in the professional setting, if you're the boss or you're the employee, or like, there's all kinds of societal expectations that largely go unspoken. And so this is also where, well, we'll save that for another day, that largely go unspoken. So like, for example, especially for women, there is a desire, I would say a desire to appear not bossy. There's a fear of being seen as bossy or a know-it-all, or, kind of fill in the blank for yourself as far as like if you can relate to something in that ballpark. And so what that means is that if you don't want to look bossy and you have something to say, rather than just saying the thing, you go through the mental hoops in your mind. You start filtering. You start like looking at what you want to say through the lens of these people who might think you're bossy, and you start taking out chunks. You start adding in other chunks. Like, let me just confess, okay? When I write an email, I write what I want to say, and then I pretty much go back to the beginning and I write something nice, okay? And why do I do that? Because I don't want to look bossy, because I don't want to be too direct. I don't want to be too assertive. And like, I've healed that a lot in my journey of authenticity, and I've learned how to kind of merge my genuine love of people, which as it turns out is actually in there. Back when I had social anxiety, I was like, people can just like stay away, okay? But no, like, I love people. I love connecting. I love having conversations and co-creating moments together, and like the spices that other people add to the flavor that like wouldn't be there if there weren't these other people. So, but how often we filter, how often we put on the mask of let me put this nice part at the beginning of the email before I tell you the direct, honest truth, right? So this filtering that goes on, again, all of that is making life harder than it needs to be. It's taking up energy. Filtering costs energy. So when we do a lot of this, social interactions get more and more and more exhausting, right? And as a really introverted person, that used to be my story of like, being around people is so draining. I hate it. It wasn't so much that being around people was draining, it was how I was approaching it. I had all kinds of filters. I had all kinds of pressure. I had all different masks that I was constantly switching between depending on which person I was talking to. No wonder social interactions were draining, but they don't have to be. Now, if anything, social interactions often, not always, but often are really energizing to me. And like, there's like an energy exchange and like an energy amplification that's actually feels really good. So again, like, looking inward at how we're handling ourselves, how that sense of self and our self-image will then kind of permeate and rise through and infect is the wrong word, but like color how we present ourselves to others. And that version of presenting ourselves to others, like it costs different amounts of energy. Being authentic costs almost no energy. You just say the thing, you just be there. And at that point, social interaction gets really fun, but there's a lot of fears to let go of in order to just be yourself. Like you can't say that. Like, just be yourself. Like, just get over it. Like, it's bad advice. Like, it's just practically like not effective. Like, doesn't work, and that makes it bad advice in my book. Another couple that really contribute to this is like the always on mentality of like kind of capitalist culture, where like you're just always available, you're always productive, you're always going and earning and checking things off the list and all of this. And what that does is puts pressure. It's like, again, like this image that you're trying to maintain of, I can do it. I don't need help. I don't need to rest. I don't need to take a day off. My mental health isn't even a factor. Like, I'm just doing all the things. And that pressure that we put on ourselves to maintain that image of like perfectly capable also goes into this next one that I call the superwoman complex, where like, I can do everything. I don't need help. I don't need support. I don't need to delegate. I don't need you implying that I need help. It's better if I just do it by myself, then at least I know it got done right. Like, all of these like images that we try to maintain that put pressure on us, and that pressure costs energy. It's exhausting. It's anxiety inducing, and anxiety is exhausting. All that tension makes life hard. And again, it breaks my heart for my past self and for anybody else resonating with this conversation. So I want to spend the rest of this episode getting into some strategies for how to, I'm not going to say like get over the anxiety, but how to put it into perspective. So the first one is mindfulness. Okay. And this is a word that gets thrown around a lot, but basically what mindfulness is you are in command of your mind. You're in command of your attention. And what happens in anxiety, especially when it leads to a panic attack, is that you have this spiral into the darkness. Okay, you have the fear thought that breeds the second fear thought, and now you've got a tornado of fear thoughts that are just overwhelming at the danger that your system is perceiving. Okay, and so you have the panic attack, you have the system shutdown. But mindfulness means that when you see the spiral start to happen, you basically on command, like you force yourself to pay attention to something else. And every bit of what happens in your body is a chemical reaction to your thoughts. So when you are perceiving danger, when you're perceiving threats, you think there's a lion bearing down on your ass, and actually you're walking into a cocktail party. Like, we can choose to shift our focus, and based on what we focus on, that's the chemical that our brain will release. That's the reaction our body will have. So this one is called the 5-4-3-2-1. So this is magical as far as like getting out of anxiety very, very quickly. Within a minute or two, you can stop an anxiety attack in its tracks simply by shifting your focus on purpose. And so 5-4-3-2-1, first, look at 5 things you can see. Okay. And like, I would even encourage you to like do this in this moment, and you can write it down or you can just do it, say it out loud. 5 things you can see, and then 4 things you can hear. So now you're listening. What do you hear? Count 4 of them. And now 3 things you can feel. Okay. 2 things. I'm missing one as far as the senses. See, hear, taste. 2 things you can smell. Okay, and 1 thing you can taste. And even just remembering that, even just like saying those prompts out loud, like I felt my system calm down. And the whole point is that when you're doing that, when you're connecting with your senses, you are grounding in the present moment. You are no longer spiraling off into the darkness. And all that's needed is for you to decide that you deserve to feel better in this moment. That's all it takes to shift your awareness onto something that will help you feel better. And that may be a big ask, depending on what you think of yourself. So much of my suffering in my early days of anxiety and depression was, at the time I didn't realize this, I felt like a victim to my emotions and my inner chemistry, but like so much of it was self-inflicted because of my poor self-image, because of me thinking that I was an awful person. That like basically I'm an awful person, so I deserve to feel bad. And then we don't help ourselves feel better. We might find something that starts to help us feel better, but then we quit it. We sabotage it because deep down we don't actually believe that we deserve to feel better. So self-image is a powerful place to focus and do some healing work, some introspections, work with a therapist or a coach. I mean, this is part of what I do in my sessions with people, is to start healing that self-image. And when the self-image is healed, authenticity is kind of a natural byproduct of that. Social anxiety naturally goes away. Like I would say magical, but it's something that we do on purpose. Okay. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to ground into the present moment. Another one, and this really goes into self-image, is to identify and challenge your limiting beliefs. The beliefs about other people, about social settings, about yourself that are causing this anxiety response in the first place. And we are going to do some episodes about how to identify your limiting beliefs and then how to break them down, how to replace them with other beliefs that are more constructive and expansive for you rather than destructive and constricting for you. This is a process, again, very much what I do in my sessions with people. But an example might be people will judge me. That's a limiting belief. And we know that it's a limiting belief because people is very general, okay? People makes it sound like it's always, that's another word to look out for, always and never. People, always, never. These are too general. It's not real. That's a story in your head that, again, you have that thought, it produces chemicals, now your body's having a reaction to the fear of people will judge me. And the truth, the reframe, the challenging this belief of like, is that true? Is that really true? How do you know that that's true? Can you absolutely be sure that that's true? And when you start to think about it like that, the answer is obvious. Some people may judge me and others will appreciate my authenticity. That's the truth. Not everybody's going to judge me, right? Everybody is an illusion, like that concept of everybody, like especially in today's age, like we all can't agree on anything. So that means there's probably about 50% of people who aren't your fan, and there's about 50% of people who are going to be like, okay, cool, like I like this is great, like that's just the way it is. Like these overgeneralized statements are often at the heart of like what's driving this anxiety. Another really practical way to practice this is to practice authentic self-expression in low stakes situations. Low stakes meaning either a safe person or a very like neutral conversation, very neutral subject matter, or like actually going into a community like one of the spaces that I hold where it is a community based in authenticity and individuation. We prize vulnerability. We do happy tears. We do sad tears. We do anger. We do joy. Like it's the human experience. So the community itself is authentic and it pulls that up and out of the people who sit in those spaces. And so practicing building your muscles in a community like that will then, like, you have those muscles to take with you into all social interactions. And even in spaces that didn't used to be safe, you find yourself better able to speak your truth because you have more experience doing it. The next one is aligning your social behaviors with personal values. One example of this is, like, what I've found is that for me, what's really valuable, what I really love, is a one-on-one conversation where we can go deep into meaningful topics. Okay. I personally don't enjoy a group conversation nearly as much. There's just not as much juice in it for me. And I definitely don't enjoy a party where, like, we're just hanging out and there's no quiet space for a one-on-one conversation. Like, I don't care about that. And so part of me realizes that, like, my social anxiety was almost like trying to keep me out of places that just, like, weren't aligned with me. And I still get anxiety when I go to parties because they're overstimulating to me. I don't like it. It's not valuable to me. My energy doesn't belong here, like, and so that internal alignment piece of, like, honoring your social anxiety, listening to yourself knows. Yourself knows where you belong and where you don't. And probably your social anxiety is spiking in places that, like, aren't really a great fit for you in the first place. So possibly there's a more valuable avenue to do your socializing, to engage with other people. And the last one is cultivating a supportive network that appreciates authenticity, right? Finding other people who are doing this same kind of work. And that's why I am creating the spaces I create. I have one on Friday. I have one on Mondays. I do one-on-one work with people. I'm also creating a 5-day free event where you can come and kind of test the waters, like kind of be a fly on the wall of, like, what's it like to be in a space like this. You can join us at the Authentic Self Uprising, where we are going to take off the mask, if only in private between you and you. We're going to get better acquainted with the real self underneath. We're going to amplify your gifts, tap into your inner wisdom, all in the goal of taking up more space and leading with authentic action so that you can turn your someday life into your right now reality. Because like we dove deep into on the last episode, you deserve that. You deserve that. And so does everybody else. Okay? Social anxiety is no fun at all. And if you relate to that and you want a safe space to start to dive into what's really going on, who are you, what's awesome about you, to fall more deeply in love with you, I highly recommend you join us at Authentic Self Uprising. You can go to owningauthenticity.com/uprising and register, claim your seat. You can invite all of the people that you want or come by yourself and be welcomed with open arms into this space. It is totally free. If you missed the next one that's coming up in October of 2024, you're finding this episode later than that, still visit the website. I'm going to host this every few months. So there may be another uprising right around the corner. And even if there's not, I'll have a link on that page so that you can book a one-on-one session with me and get connected to one of the community spaces that I offer, maybe dive deeper into some one-on-one work with me, or just take me up on that free conversation and outline what your next step for a deeper version of authenticity might look like based on your unique situation and circumstances for where you're at right now. Dear friend, it has been my honor, my privilege, and my pleasure to share this space with you. I do hope that you will take such good care of your beautiful self, and so will I.